Good evening, folks, and welcome to another edition of the What the Fantasy Football Show. We are a proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network, brought to you from PlayFFWC.com. We bring it to you all. We have 16 different podcasts, 30 hours a week of different programming. Make sure you check us out on fulltimefantasy.com, and on the podcast link, you get all the different podcasts we have. And right now, we want to turn the show over to our host, Mr. Tony Sincata.
Wow, what an opening from Jim Day. Mike Blewett, Jim Day has really progressed. Now, he opened that like he was Merv Griffin.
He's like a ringmaster now. You know, you got to get him a top hat, maybe a handlebar mustache going on. It's the three-ring circus. He's the ringmaster.
Pretty soon we're going to be like, he's going to be like that Warren Buffett. I think that was the UFC guy, right? Warren Buffett.
Yeah, I think it's a different guy. Warren Buffett, second richest man on the planet. Different guy.
Who's number one richest guy in the planet?
I think it's Bezos now.
Oh, yeah.
I think Buffett's still top 3, top 5, somewhere in there.
You know what's crazy, Jim Day? The guy on Amazon is the guy, Mike. The guy that owns Amazon is the number one richest guy. And he recently got divorced, and he was sending naked pictures of himself and his girlfriend there. Once you get so much money, can't you find better ways to entertain yourself?
Just think they just get so bored with everything else. They're always trying to do something stupid. You know, it is what it is. You're never going to take stupid out of people.
I remember when I first started in this business 10 years ago, and I just opened up with an Amazon leader sending dick pics to people to open a show. And I used to tell people, Matthew Berry will never start a show like this. And Mike, I think I'm pretty all right on the money.
Yeah, you've certainly progressed over the years to at least making different targets of your disdain or your wackiness. But yeah, it was a tough divorce. You know, he lost somewhere in the neighborhood of $30 billion.
That's all? $30 billion? Oh, man, come on. That's chump change. I got that in my wallet.
Chump change is where it goes. You're listening to W2F Fantasy Football. We're going to talk a little football. Jim Day, Mike Blewett. Of course, we do it every Wednesday night. What you need to do, go to iTunes, which doesn't exist anymore. But go to any of those podcasts and hit subscribe. Subscribe. Then it goes to your phone as soon as we're done, and you never miss out. Last week we talked a little strategy, and this week talking a little strategy too. One of the things that we all talk about this early in the year is best ball leagues. And we talked about different strategies last week in dynasty leagues. Jim, what kind of strategies do you have when it comes to best ball leagues that might be a little different than one-year leagues?
Well, what I'm trying to do with a best ball league is I don't need somebody, and I have this argument a lot with people, I don't need a lot of consistent players on my roster. I don't want the guys that are going to give you consistent 12, 14, 15 points every week like I would in a season-long league, and I know I can feel comfortable starting them every week. I want the guys that are going to give me the big peaks, because I could care less about the valleys in best ball because they just won't be in the starting lineup. But if you get those guys that give you those big peak games, and even if they only do it a few times a year, that's the great thing about best ball is usually the drafts are so deep that you have plenty of depth to cover that. So I want to look for the guys that'll give you those big games. Sure, they'll give you games where they get 3 or 4 points, but that doesn't matter because they're not in your starting lineup at that point because it's done automatically. So I want the guys that are going to give me those peaks. One of my favorites is always Deshaun Jackson because you know he's going to have some big games every year. I love him again now that he's back in Philly with Wentz. Should be great. You know, all the preseason hype is really high that they're working well together. But even without that, I know he's going to have a few big games with some big plays. And I love him in my best ball lineup. Whereas in a season long where I have to try and start him every week, I usually don't draft him.
Mike, how about yourself when it comes to best ball strategies and what differs from year-to-year leagues?
Well, certainly you are going to be picking guys, similar to what Jim said, you're going to be picking guys that you're looking for that have a lot more upside. When you're drafting in a redraft league with 12 teams, your goal really is to try to have some level of consistency and not wild swings from one pick to the next. Maybe not picking a team in a redraft league with several guys who are injury prone but have high upside. You know, think of guys like Devontae Freeman. If he were to stay healthy for 16 games, he would see a lot of carries and it will be in a productive offense. But in a redraft league, I'm really going to avoid him because I'm generally fading injury prone running backs. I don't want to deal with it. If I do have to deal with it, I'm going to pay a very low price. In a best ball league, he's somebody that'll go a little bit higher in that format because when you start calculating touches and upside, I'd give you an example of a guy that you might take in a best ball that you would never really think of in a 12-team redraft.
You know, the one guy that I'm taking that I wouldn't take in a 12-team redraft, and he might get cut, to be honest with you, is Teddy Ginn in New Orleans, right? He's going to have 3 or 4 games where he's going to have that big game. And I actually try to pair him with a guy that I have on every team is Traquan Smith out in New Orleans, and I'm trying to get those 2 guys on the best ball teams that I've drafted so far.
Yeah, I can't argue with that at all. Again, it's those big play guys like John Brown. They're not consistent. They're not going to give you production each and every week, but they'll give you those big scores. Even Robert Foster, I still love this year. Kid came out of nowhere last year with Josh Allen, did a good job, especially towards the end of the season. I know they got Brown in there now, but now you got 2 guys on the outside that can stretch the field. And the one thing about Josh Allen is he does like to throw the ball down the field.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of players I really do look for because you build on those players that can give you those big weeks as opposed to guys that can give you steady. And if you get 4 or 5 of them, you're pretty much going to have the whole season, if not covered fully, very close to it.
Tony, I ended up with Josh Gordon in the Scott Fishbowl League last year, which definitely plays more like a best ball league. I know it's kind of a hybrid in some ways, but Josh Gordon wasn't a guy I was really targeting at all. But to get him at the point where I got him with the opportunity for upside, I was willing to take a chance. It didn't work out, but those are the types of people you look for that are risky but can provide a huge pop when they're on the field.
And for the listening audience, just like any football podcast you listen to in the last 4 years, we will talk Josh Gordon a little later. He doesn't play, but every podcast talks about him, and we want to make sure we're in there. One of the strategies that I do every time, I don't care if it's a 10-team best ball league, which I don't play in, a 12-team best ball league, or 14. I think it's a bigger emphasis on 14 is I want 3 quarterbacks on my roster.
Yeah.
When you guys pay attention to the quarterbacks, the one thing that I think I really don't have a handle on yet is, Jim, when you're playing best ball and you're like me and you're going to draft 3 quarterbacks, you might not need to pick the first, second, third, fourth quarterback because you're going to have 3 of them, so you're going to get the best one each week. You can get 10, 12, and 16, Jim, and I think you can go that way.
Oh, I think it's absolutely perfect to go that way. There's really no need to pay up. Again, because like you said, with 3 options, you're usually going to have a pretty good option, most weeks. There'll be some weeks where it doesn't come together. It's just natural beast, but that could be the same thing if you have 2 studs and a backup guy. So, yeah, I agree with you. There's no need. Again, there's so many what look to be really good quarterbacks this year that should be in play for fantasy. A lot of people are moving Kyler Murray up rankings now. I mean, he's in the top 10 in a lot of different rankings. And the guy hasn't even thrown a pass in the NFL yet. So there's a lot of talent out there. You still got guys like Phillip Rivers, who's coming off the board at like the 19th quarterback, according to FFWC Best Ball ADP right now.
That's crazy.
And that's ridiculous. He's only not been a top 12 quarterback as a starter 1 year out of his whole career. I believe it was 2013. He just didn't have a good season. Nothing came together. Every other season he's been a starter. He's been inside the top 12. And again, he gets no love. His ADP is the 19th quarterback. Happens every year, yet every year he still ends up in the top 12. If you can grab him at 18th or 19th quarterback, why do you need to pay up for an Andrew Luck or any of these guys in the early going? I just don't think you need to.
Mike, one of the things with the best ball format that I look at is that when we play daily fantasy, and a lot of people out there that follow me during daily fantasy, is that they always want to pair a quarterback with a wide receiver in case the quarterback goes off that day. I don't hear about it much in 1-year leagues, but in a best ball format, we talked about Traquan Smith, Teddy Ginn, and of course, we got their wide receiver being the number 1 paid wide receiver in football, Drew Brees, right? Do you ever go and pair a quarterback with a wide receiver, and that's your strategy going into a draft?
I don't think I ever go into a draft saying I have to get the double dip on a particular team. Now, if I feel differently on the whole about a certain offense, I may actually look to do that. Last year, that probably would have been for me Mariota and Corey Davis because I thought they were going to have a better season than they ultimately did. But on the other side, I would have gone Matt Ryan maybe with – I mean, it wouldn't have been hard actually to do Julio and Matt Ryan. You pay a big price for Julio, but last year I was really trying to wait on quarterbacks. We all do now, But last year I thought was a prime example of guys that you were getting so late that were really productive. Mahomes, Ryan, Rivers, Roethlisberger were all incredibly productive in double-digit rounds. So I understand best balls would play out differently, but I could see a scenario in which if you feel differently about a Matt Ryan in 2018, that you could have fashioned a way to have Julio and or Ridley and or Matt Ryan all on the same team.
What's your thoughts, Jim? Have you ever gone in and tried to secure a quarterback and wide receiver, or maybe a pass-catching running back in any of your drafts?
I'm with Mike. I don't go in with that plan. If it falls to me in that way where I already have a good wide receiver on a team and I'm getting to a point where I want to grab my quarterback and his quarterback is there, that might nudge me in that direction because I do like to have that tandem if it works out. But I won't go out of my way to grab that tandem. If it falls to me, I'll take it. But if it doesn't fall to me, I'm not going to rush to say, oh, I need to get that quarterback now and pay for it early. I just don't do that. See, to me, that's one of the best things about drafting as much as I do is that I feel comfortable always going with a new strategy if something changes in a draft.
You're listening to WTF Fantasy Football. We got Jim Day, Mike Blewett. We're talking a little fantasy football, getting you ready for, of course, draft season 2019. Here's a little game we're going to play. You can play at home, too. And here's the thing. Vanna White is not here because it's a podcast. We could lie to you and say she's here, and you'd never know. But she isn't here.
She's on my lap right now.
And you don't have to buy a vowel, Jim, for this game either. It's called Fact or Fiction. I will make a statement which I've either taken from somewhere or my own statement, and we'll go fact or fiction. First one, Mike Blewett, I'll go to you. The Athletic, but none of the people that we know over there, reports that Dante Moncrief is the slam dunk number 2 receiver in Pittsburgh. Mike Blewett, Steelers fan, fantasy host, fact or fiction?
I'm going to call that fiction. I can't say it's a slam dunk. It doesn't mean that I doubt that he could be the number 2 there, but to call it a slam dunk, I think is ridiculous. It's probably people overreacting to OTA workouts. There has to be a place for James Washington in the offense, and that's going to have to evolve. They'll have to see how much Juju can handle the number 1 cornerbacks that he's going up against, and decide what the better alternatives are if that doesn't work out, or he is mitigated in some way, from what he did last year or what Antonio Brown was able to do at the 1. So I can't call it a slam dunk. I have to call it fiction.
Mike, your thoughts? The Athletic reports Dante Moncrief, Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver, a slam dunk number 2 in the offense for Pittsburgh.
Well, my name's Jim, by the way, but I actually like,
yes.
I actually do like Moncrief as number 2, but to call it a slam dunk, like Mike says, that's ridiculous. I do expect him to be the number 2. I do. He's just more polished than James Washington is yet. Washington is going to have some big plays. He'll make some splashes here or there. I think Moncrief is going to be the more established number 2, the one who will end up with better reception numbers, better yardage numbers, but Washington could have the better touchdown numbers. There was definitely something there that they didn't like about Washington last year. He started off great in the preseason. They got into the season and nothing seemed to be working, and Roethlisberger got down on him and all of that. I think that comes into play. When you look at Moncrief, everybody's down. Think Moncrief is done. I don't think so. I think you go early in the career when he was with the Colts, and he was either injured or Luck was injured. It just never seemed to come together. And then, of course, he goes to Jacksonville where you just get subpar quarterback play. All of a sudden now he's on a team with a good, solid number 1 wide receiver and a good quarterback and a good running system that'll allow him to be able to get out there and work some of that magic. I think he's going to surprise a lot of people. I don't know what it is. I just think he's better than people expect him to be at this point, and I think he's going to outplay James Washington.
Well, Tony, I was a believer in the past, and I'm not saying he can't get back there now, but Jim did state a couple of things that are an issue. He wasn't able to stay healthy even when he had a lockdown quarterback in Indianapolis. James Washington is coming off a 16-reception rookie year. Antonio Brown didn't have a productive rookie year with Ben Roethlisberger at quarterback. I'm not suggesting he's the next Antonio Brown, but I do think that there's room for him to grow. Roethlisberger is known to be hard on rookies in a really unflattering, rude, unprofessional way. Now, Juju...
He almost treats them like girls.
Yeah, Juju... Well, Juju is... That was a good one.
Gotcha.
So Juju is the exception, really, to the rule at rookie wide receiver. He had a hugely productive rookie season with Roethlisberger. There's articles that came out over a year ago when Juju's rookie season, with him stating to ESPN reporters that Roethlisberger doesn't really talk to rookies. I can't imagine how unpopular that approach is, but everybody just deals with it because he's been given carte blanche by the organization. So I think Washington's struggles are of him being a rookie in a sort of a weird dynamic that exists there, and I'm hoping for much bigger things. And I think if people are saying that Moncrief is a slam dunk, that's good for the James Washington shares that I want to pick up.
There you have it for the people out there. Question number 2, fact or fiction? Matthew Stafford, Detroit Lions quarterback, is being reported playing with a broken back last season. Detroit now a run-heavy offense. Stafford no longer a number 1 fantasy quarterback in any format. Jim, your call. Fact or fiction?
It's fact. I don't think he's a number 1 quarterback right now, but I do think he definitely takes a step back this year, back toward being closer to that realm than he was last year. Let's face it, none of us knew about the back until just recently. And if that's true and he played all year, I mean, kudos to the man. You know, and it could be just slight fractures, things like that. We just don't know the extent of that. But the same fact is that they lost Marvin Jones last year. They didn't really have any tight ends playing. It just never came together as an offense. You know, they had Billy Joe Bob Cooter there, and, you know, he's gone. I expect more from this offense this year, especially they, you know, use that big draft capital to go out and get the tight end, Hawkinson, who I love, use number 8 pick to go get him. So they're obviously going to get him involved. If Marvin Jones is back and fully healthy, and so far everything seems to be pointing to the fact that he will be, I think this offense has the pieces for Stafford to get close to that top 12 again. I just don't know if he gets there unless he really has an outstanding season.
What's your thoughts, Mike? Matt Stafford being a top quarterback in any format this season?
Yeah, I don't see that at all. I'm not really a big believer in the Lions overall. That being said, they ran the ball 404 times last year. They passed it 375. So they were one of the – there's not a lot of teams that are on the positive side of rushing versus passing. They were one of them. Now, they were 11th in the league in – no, you know what? I screwed that up. It's 574 passing attempts and 404 rushing attempts. So they actually did throw the ball more last year, but they went 6-10. They were trailing a lot. I do think based on what they've done in the draft recently, including Kerryon Johnson last year and what they were able to do this year in the draft, which was draft another offensive lineman early, my thought process is that they are trying to go that way. They obviously got T.J. Hawkinson there. They had drafted Frank Ragnow in the first round last year. Taylor Decker is a first-round pick there. I just think they started to move towards a team that can more effectively block for these weapons. They have good young weapons now. Jim, you love Hawkinson. They have Kerryon Johnson. Now they have Kenny Golladay, who's clearly the number 1 there. Marvin Jones as the veteran, Amendola as the slot. You have to finally, for the first time in a while, guys, they actually have a pretty good complement of young skill players. Calvin Johnson was the best, but who else was there with him? Right. It was a failed Eric Ebron, and they had Nate Burleson for a while. There just wasn't a lot of pieces to go around. It's why it was the Calvin Johnson show. Now I do think that they will increase the number of rushes. They won't be 18th in the league. I think they move certainly to the top half. And if Stafford doesn't have the 11th most passing attempts in the league, you can drop that down. And he wasn't effective when he was top 11 last year. So I don't think he's anywhere near number 1 QB status like he was, same as he was last year.
Yeah, I think he's a huge volume quarterback, and I just don't think the volume will be there this year. And you're right. They used to put up big numbers, Stafford, when they had a poor defense and they were playing from behind back then.
And they had no running backs.
Yeah, now they got running backs. The game will stay 700 close. Times. Yeah, I just don't see it this year. Fact or fiction? Rumors out this week, just like every other team in the NFL, that Pittsburgh will go running back by committee. James Conner will have 100 more touches than any other running back in Pittsburgh. Jim, fact or fiction?
Total fact. Absolutely fact. Connor's going to be their bell cow. They'll get Samuel involved like they did last year, and he'll have some plays, and he may even get a little bit more involved than he did last year. But Connor had, like 270 total touches last year.
Yeah.
Samuel's had like 80. So I see Samuel's going up to maybe 110, but I still see Connor's being over 250 as long as he stays healthy. But you could say that about every single running back in the league. So, yeah, I expect Connor's absolutely still be the number one guy, and he's going to have over 100 carries more than anybody else.
Your thoughts, Mike Blue, on the Pittsburgh running back situation? Will Connor have 100 more touches than any other running back in Pittsburgh?
So Jalen Samuels, to Jim's point, 56, 20, he's had 70 and 82 touches last year. He'd really have to double that, which doesn't make sense to me, in order for him to get within 100. We can even move down Connor's touches. 270 on the nose last year, move him down to 250. You want to get him down to 240. It will still take Samuels doubling his touches to get there, because nobody else is not going to be anybody else but Samuels that could get close. I just don't see it. I think it's too aggressive for them to share the ball that much. I understand wanting to keep Connor healthy. Fine. Knock off 20 to 40 touches over the course of the year. I still don't think Samuels will get there within 100 touches.
Next up, fact or fiction. Todd Gurley will have at least 8 games this season with less than 20 touches. Of course, Gurley lit it up all year long, then faded down the stretch, and of course went AWOL in the Super Bowl. Jim Day, they're talking about an arthritic knee. Less than 20 touches, 8 games this season.
I think he does go less than 20 touches in 8 games. He did it 5 times last year, all from week 7 on. So 5 out of his last 8 games, because he did miss the last 2 regular season games, he was under 20 touches. So we obviously saw that number dip. The big number here, though, is in those games, he was averaging 26.2 fantasy points in PPR leagues. He was still the number 2 running back from week 7 on, even though in 5 of those 8 games, he had less than 20 touches. It doesn't matter. In this offense, the fact that he gets all the goal line work, he's still going to catch passes. He can drop down to 250 touches and even slightly less if they need to, like Alvin Kamara, and still put up great fantasy points. I think people are overreacting like crazy. I've been saying it on every single podcast I'm on. Right now, I'm grabbing him every time I can in the second round, and I'll continue to do that.
I'll tell you what, I agree with everything Jim just said, and I picked him number 12 in my last draft. And here's the thing is that even with the number of touches going down, I don't see in that offense how he doesn't score 15 touchdowns.
I agree with you. And I agree with the only thing I'm curious, though, is that is a lot of games to have less than 20 touches. You said 5 of his last 8. I think that would be close, is my only quarrel with the fact or fiction on this. I think it would be really close. I don't think it's a slam dunk that he's got 9 games or more of less than 20 touches, but I really agree philosophically with everything that you guys said.
Yeah.
Hey, hold on one second. 10 games last year for Alvin Kamara, he had less than 20 touches. Didn't affect him.
I don't think it's going to impact him greatly. Like Tony said, you could still draft him 12. But, I just think Gurley could see 9 games with 20 or more touches.
And the advantage that he has over Kamara, it's different this year, but last year with Mark Ingram there, is that we know Gurley's going to get the ball inside the 5-yard line. We didn't always know that with Alvin Kamara.
Right. Absolutely. We didn't know that. I'm still not sure we know that with Kamara, but it doesn't matter with him. He just makes the plays. Same thing's going to be with Gurley. Again, I can't say it enough. People are just overreacting. And now that there's people out there drafting Darrell Henderson in the 5th freaking round. Are you nuts, people? Come on now. That's just a joke.
That's just hoping.
That's just
that's
bad.
Hoping for something.
Yeah, well, if you're going to do that, you might as well take Chase Edmonds in the 5th round.
There you go. Jim laying down the law on the people out there, firing away their 5th-round pick. Jim, is a 5th-round pick too much for the people that drafted Todd Gurley? Is 5th too early for that?
Oh, absolutely. I would never take a backup that early in any draft. I'm not a big guy for handcuffs anyway. And really, the only guy I really consider handcuffing this year would be Damian Williams of Kansas City, just because I still like Carlos Hyde. Just went right out of my head. I still like Carlos Hyde. I like you a lot, Carlos. I just couldn't think of your name. I still like him a lot. He does a lot of what they like. Don't get me wrong. I am drafting Damian Williams when I can all the time. I think he does everything they need him to do. but Carlos Hyde is still going in the 10th round in most FWC drafts. And I'll take him in the 9th round as my backup to Williams every day and feel good about it. To spend a 5th or 6th or even a 7th round on a backup you hope will get the job or take more carries, to me, that's just wasting a draft pick.
Tony, speaking of handcuffs, you know where C.J. Anderson is now?
Prison.
No, jeez.
Oh,
well,
when you said
I didn't see that in the news.
You know, that's what I thought. I said the same thing. I thought I was going to say my answer was going to be next to Kellen Winslow.
Oh man!
God help him if he's anywhere near that guy. Anyway, to answer the football question that I asked, I'll just answer it myself. He's backing up in Detroit. So if you need to carry on Johnson handcuff, they got Ty Johnson there. They drafted in the 6th round. Zach Zenner still hanging around, and Theo Riddick, but C.J. Anderson with the Lions right now. So
they don't think Theo Riddick's going to stick with the team. They could save a few $1 million by cutting him.
Yeah.
So here's the problem I have with C.J. Anderson, picking C.J. Anderson, and why I thought he might be in prison, is that he ran really well last year when he had an opportunity, but he looked about 30 pounds overweight.
He was overweight.
Hey, well, you know,
he didn't look.
He was
he looked it because he was
watching football on Sunday. You know, having those big pizzas and all that kind of stuff. He wasn't thinking about keeping in shape, and then all of a sudden they needed him, and he came back, and even with all that extra weight, he ran well. Imagine what he could do this year. Yeah, imagine what he could do this year if he gets back in shape. I always liked the guy for some reason. It didn't make any sense. A couple of years ago, he was a 1,000-yard rusher. And all of a sudden now he can't find a team. I thought that was
makes sense when you look at it in totality now, right? Like the guy was overweight when he was still looking for a job. And I think maybe some teams saw – no, I'm just being honest. I think some teams saw that maybe he didn't have a work ethic that they could rely on him to be around. And he found himself in an unbelievable position with a supreme play caller that runs a lot of 11 personnel and gives the guys room to run. They're working with a really good offensive line, an excellent play caller, and whether it's Gurley or Anderson, there's ample room for those guys to run.
Oh, yeah, he had some big holes. He definitely had some big holes that helped him out. There's no doubt about it. I mean, he'd hit that line, and all of a sudden, the promised land ahead. Nobody around him for 20 yards.
Absolute craziness. WTF Fantasy Football. Jim Day, Mike Blewett, Tony Zagata. We're going fact or fiction. Everybody in the fantasy community loves Mike Williams of the L.A. Chargers, San Diego Chargers. I still like to call him San Diego.
I
got to tell you, is there enough catches for all these guys? Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, fact or fiction? 175 catches this year. Mike, what are your thoughts? Fact or fiction?
I think you picked a pretty good number that made me really think about it. Because of the injury history of both players, I'll go under.
I think that's the one thing that when you look at this, especially with Keenan Allen the last couple of years, the owners get excited, and then all of a sudden, you know, he misses a couple games. Here, I don't think we've seen the best of Mike Williams yet, but when they're both on the field, I can't see them both putting up 10 catches every game, Jim. So how do you go and look at this? Can they catch 175? To see where they're both being drafted, you're going to need that.
I'm going to say no, they can't. I don't think it happens. I mean, if you look at the last couple of years for Allen, he's been right around that 100 reception mark. I think he had 102 in 2017. I'm pretty sure he had 98 last year. 97. So right around that 100, 97, okay. Yeah. Right around that 100 range for him. I don't see Mike Williams taking a leap from 43 up to 75. I do see him taking a leap. I think he gets up to that 60 range, and he still has those big plays. He still makes those touchdowns that got him on the map last year. I still think that's a big part of his game. But I can't see him getting up to that 75 reception range. First of all, they got Hunter Henry coming back now, which is another good guy that Rivers likes. So that's going to play into it. Plus, Rivers, you know, outside of Keenan Allen, Rivers does like to splash it around to different players and move the ball around. So, yeah, I have to say that's fiction, even though I do like Mike Williams a lot.
Tough numbers there. Try to get the ball to everybody. And tell you what, an offense that you won't talk about a lot is the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's being reported that Leonard Fournette will be involved in the Jaguars passing game. He currently has 58 receptions in 21 games as a professional player. Fact or fiction, Mike Blewett? Leonard Fournette will have 45 catches this season.
That's a big leap, but maybe I made this comparison, I thought a couple of weeks ago, but forgive me. I mean, I may not have done it here, but Zeke Elliott got a reputation for not being a pass catcher. And then all of a sudden they started throwing him the ball. And lo and behold, people realized what a great all-around back he was. Could that same thing happen to Fournette? I think it could to some extent. I think it makes more sense to have him get the ball in space. But to immediately bump him up to 45 catches might be a little bit much. I'm almost neutral on this one, but I'll say fiction just because it might be a few too many catches. Melvin Gordon caught 50 passes last year. I don't know that I could put Fournette up in that range.
Jim, your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are I'm passing on Fournette. I am not a Fournette fan. I don't like that injury history. I hate the idiocy that comes with him as well. I always seem to find somebody else I like more where he's currently going. Look, the guy's a good runner when he's on the field. There's no doubt. He has that ability to make people miss. He can do a little bit of everything. I get all that. And if he stays healthy for 16 weeks, he could absolutely be, right in contention as one of the top backs. I get all that. I just don't trust it. Those injuries are definitely an issue for me. And again, the idiocy, I think, bothers me more than anything. To come off the bench to punch a guy who has a football helmet on with a full face mask and then end up getting yourself thrown out of that game, your team loses, and then you're ended up suspended for the next game because of it, and your team loses that too, basically takes away any chance your team had of getting in the playoffs. That kind of stuff just really sticks with me. I am just not a Leonard Fournette fan. Could he catch that many passes? Absolutely. Will he? I don't think so.
Tony, I assume you went with that number because he played 8 games last year and he had 22 catches. You just do the math, and he'd be right there. It just seems a little high, but clearly there's an appetite for him to utilize that. We'll see if the offense goes that route. It's a whole new offense now, with Nick Foles there.
They have a new offensive coordinator. They have a new quarterback. I think that they still going to rely on the defense, even though the defense has some holes in it that weren't there the last 2 years. I could definitely see it, but the one thing is, like Jim mentioned, I don't see any way this guy plays 16 games. Yeah. Whether it's a suspension, an injury, there's something that always follows this guy. I think he would be a lock for 45 if he played 16 games, but I just don't see it happening.
Plus, you also have you made the argument last week, too, about the Jags. Like, there's not a lot to love about the receiving core. So he is technically, he's your most talented offensive player, right? Like, he's the most talented one. So doesn't it make sense to have the ball in his hands more often?
Yeah, so Leonard Fournette, not a lot of love here. I actually haven't picked him in any draft yet, and I have picked him the last couple of years in some drafts. I thought he would get some big touchdown numbers, but you get disappointed. And before, you always had that T.J. Yeldon in the background, and you could always get a nice pairing there because T.J. Yeldon picked late, but no longer in Jacksonville to pick up that additional work in the Jaguars' backfield. Fact or fiction? Jim, got to ask you. You woke up this morning and you said, I wonder what Johnny Manziel's doing.
Well, actually, I turned to his wife and asked her, but she really didn't want to comment.
You guys are coming hard at people tonight.
Hey,
C.J. Anderson and Johnny are really catching a lot of shrapnel tonight.
His wife is pretty cute, though. It is what it is. Right now the big talk about him is whether or not he's going to join the XFL and whether or not he's going to make a splash there. The only way he makes a splash in the XFL is if they have a pool.
Whoa, a pool there. Mike, when's the last time you thought of Johnny Manziel?
When I got your email today that we were going to talk about Johnny Manziel. Prior to that, I don't remember it. And as I Googled something about him, it says that he tried to change his name to John a couple of weeks ago. No longer Johnny, and then he ditched it 5 days later. So he's not even as successful with his own name change.
He fumbles his name.
So his decision-making has not improved, as we just figured that out there for all the Johnny Manziel fans. Guys,
and he had nowhere to go but up, and it still hasn't improved.
Well, that's the end of fact or fiction. One of the things that we talk about on a lot of the shows, and I love to get these guys a mind on this because I actually changed in the last 5 years, I'd say, how I go about this. It's called diversification, folks. Diversification. All you guys out there that own stock, all you have your 401k plan, you don't want to throw it all in one thing, right? Because you win some, you lose some. What about fantasy football? If you're listening to a podcast in June, I'm thinking you're playing in more than one league. So my thing is, do you look at your rankings in every league, pick exactly who you have right there next on your list? Or do you go at it like this and say, hey, you know what? The last draft, I picked Alvin Kamara. This one, I got in the same rankings, same bubble, Todd Gurley right next to him. This time I'll go Todd Gurley in case there's an injury there and I don't ruin all my teams. It's called diversification. You'll hear a lot of people talk about it. I thought it was the biggest cop-out in the world 10 years ago when I first started. I said you go after every win. You want the best team. And, Jim, just like everybody else, you get older, you get wiser, and I diversify.
Yeah, you have to these days, no doubt, especially if, like you're talking about, if you play in multiple leagues. I mean, I find a lot with myself. I tend to gravitate towards players I really like. A few of those players last year really hurt. I had on a lot of my teams, I had Larry Fitzgerald, I had Carlos Hyde, I had Marshawn Lynch, all because I thought they were good values where they were coming off the board. And Carlos Hyde and Marshawn Lynch weren't doing badly until, of course, Carlos Hyde got shipped to Jacksonville and did nothing. And then Marshawn Lynch got hurt. But they were doing okay until that point. They were given value where they were drafted, which was usually like 6th round, maybe even the 7th round. And Larry Fitzgerald, I've just always been a fan. So I do tend to gravitate towards him. And you can see the effects of that when you see those guys have bad years and all of a sudden half your teams are struggling because of that. So, yeah, the diversification is definitely something that really, again, like you said, a bunch of years ago, we never thought about. I don't really draft from rankings. I use tiers. I like to group players that I think have relative value in my tiers so that this way really helps with diversification, because if I have one player in a tier that I have on other leagues, I can grab somebody else in that same tier and feel comfortable about it and use that to make sure that I keep my shares of a lot of people even across the board. That's what I'm trying to do now, so that I don't have, one single player that's on 60% of my teams or something like that. I like to keep the number lower.
Mike, how's your feeling on diversification when it comes to fantasy football?
Certainly, if you're racking up a lot of best ball leagues, you're going to have some level of diversification. Otherwise, you're going to be dead in the water. There's too much risk in having the same player over and over again at a particular position. So best ball, I think you're going to have some level of diversification. In your regular redraft leagues, where say you're playing in 5 or 6 or 7 leagues, hypothetically, sort of like what we do when we're playing in regular season leagues. Jim's in hundreds at times, but for many of you out there that like to play in single-digit to early double-digit leagues, I think there's 2 things that you really have to diversify that I like to do. I think at quarterback, you can sprinkle it around and end up with, like last year, you could have ended up with a nice sprinkle of Rivers, Roethlisberger, Ryan, Mahomes, those guys late, spread that out, and they ended up all being successful. If a Mariota doesn't work, that's okay. You had the other guys. And then the other place where you really, I think, personally have to diversify is the first round. Because when that first-round player goes down, Tony, and it happens every year, you are going to be in a really bad position, especially if you loaded up on one guy like Fournette last year. You would have been really screwed if you loaded up at Fournette across the board because you were in love with him. I think the first round you have to take emotions out of it, pick a few different guys, and spread the wealth. And then you won't bury all your teams when the one guy goes down.
Like Le'Veon Bell last year.
Yeah, that was a big one for people there. Those were the guys that like to gamble. Those are probably the guys that don't diversify either. The people that took Le'Veon Bell, probably, I got him in all my leagues. I'll be all ready when the playoffs come.
No, the one guy I took more than any other guy last year, and I took him in every league, was James Conner. But he was virtually free. I'm happy to do that. If I'm taking a guy in the, he was on the waiver wire. He didn't even get drafted in some leagues.
I'm glad you bring that up, Mike. I'm glad you brought that up. If there's a guy you like that's going late, pick him in every single team, Jim, right? Because you have nothing to lose. You cut him or he doesn't play. Like, you go there. But when you diversify, I think it's guys in the first 5 or 6 rounds we're talking about, or a guy that's going to start at every position. Mike knew going into the season he was taking a lottery pick here with Connor, and the only way he was going to pay off is if Bell wasn't there. So that's a lottery pick, and you can do that in every draft.
Right, and that's a great point. When we're talking diversification, we are talking the early rounds, just to spread that around. Because once you get past the 7th, 8th round, everything at that point, the draft capital just doesn't really cost you a lot. And especially if you get past the 10th round, and you got guys like Connor was last year, where you can grab him that late. I'm with Mike. I grabbed him a lot last year as well. But because I swore that Le'Veon Bell was going to hold out at least till week 10, and I was saying that everywhere I could that I thought he was, telling people to grab Connor, and they still weren't buying it.
I'm the greatest mind in fantasy football, so I don't mind admitting when I'm wrong, people. I did not have James Conner on a single team because I said, there's no way Le'Veon Bell is going to throw $17 million out the window. What idiot would do that? And I stand by the idiot statement, but I was wrong about James Conner.
Yeah.
Hey, it happens to all of us.
Connor was just low cost. That's the only thing. The other thing I would say, too, I could probably apply that strategy on some level to that tight end position too, because we talked about that a lot. Now, I know we're all going to wait for that tight end, but thinking that, like, say, Jared Cook, we feel like we have to talk about him on every show. I don't know that I would necessarily go out and target Jared Cook every time either, just because of the high risk of injury at the tight end position. Now, if it's cheap enough, then so be it. I'll probably have Jack Doyle on a lot of teams. We talked about it last week. I probably will load up on him because he's so cheap. It's the same sort of lottery pick thing that you're talking about.
Yeah, it's fact. For the people out there, I have 3 teams with Jack Doyle and Tyler Kroft as my tight ends. Well, somebody's got to catch the ball in Buffalo, Jim.
Yeah, Dawson Knox.
Do they?
Well, that's true, Mike. Maybe I'm taking too much for granted. It wouldn't be a fantasy football podcast if we didn't talk about Josh Gordon. Josh Gordon's still being drafted. Josh Gordon was being talked on the NFL channel. Josh Gordon's in videos with Tom Brady catching passes. Now, I've seen Mark Wahlberg catch passes from Tom Brady. Nobody drafts him. Should Mark Wahlberg and Josh Gordon be drafted the same this year? Jim, are you jumping in on this Josh Gordon stuff? If we're drafting tonight, is Josh Gordon being considered?
Well, hold on, because I got to go out and get my Wahlburger before we start the draft. They're actually really good burgers. If you haven't tried one, they really are very good. We're talking about lottery picks here. Gordon makes a perfect lottery pick. If you go back and look what he did last year, he started out slow when he did get on the field, but then you could see his momentum start to pick up with Brady. Now, you can get him at the end of any of these drafts. Why not take a shot on him? Because we don't know if he gets suspended for the whole rest of the year, if they keep him on, out, or if they bring him back. They let him try to come back last year. There's a chance they let him try to come back again this year. What if it's for the second half of the year? All of a sudden he steps on the field with Brady and they start connecting. So I don't mind, especially in a best ball league, if I can grab him 17th, 18th round, why not? You're talking about him working with the greatest quarterback of all time, according to 90% of the people on the planet. So why not take a shot on him, especially in a team that's going to be looking for that second wide receiver to step up? Right now, they're still talking about Philip Dorsett as being that guy. You know what? I'd rather have Gordon than Dorsett.
For all the people out there talking about Tom Brady, in games Josh Gordon played, Tom Brady threw for 100 more yards than he did without Josh Gordon in the lineup there. Mike, are you drafting Josh Gordon?
I think in some instances, like best ball leagues, I'm willing to take a shot if he's dropping. But I do think it's pretty curious because there's no update right now on his potential reinstatement. And I would find it surprising, actually, if he got back on the field for all 16 games. I actually appreciate the fact that the NFL has approached his particular case with a lot of common sense and realized that the guy is trying to work through his issues. But I do think, if I'm being honest, that he is getting a little bit more lenient treatment from the NFL because of the high-profile nature of him and his issues. I think if it was a lesser player, he'd be out for the year and they'd move on. Am I overstepping my bounds by saying that?
Here's what I think is going to happen. I totally do. I think the NFL has really said, hey, this is a guy with a huge problem, right? He's wasted 2, 3, 4 years of his career. We're going to do whatever we can to help him. And I always thought that was the weird thing, is you take someone that's addicted to drugs or alcohol and you take away their job where they have some semblance of responsibility and you throw them out there. You weren't trying to help them when you did that. I think they're taking a different approach with Josh Gordon than everyone else. Right or wrong, that's where I think it is. I think Josh Gordon's going to have an 8-game suspension. And I think based on previous history, he might have a hard time getting through the 8 games.
It's absolutely a possibility. And again, it's not like I'm going to, invest a 10th round pick in him. Grab him in the 18th as my wide receiver 6. Why not take that shot?
There you have it. WTF Fantasy Football. Next up, Derek Carr is a guy that I'm not in love with, the Raiders quarterback. In fact, the first 4 years of his career, I think I still called him David Carr. That's how impressed I was with his play. how the hell is he going to keep Antonio Brown a top 3 receiver? Antonio Brown's been number 1 for a while. I think he's in jeopardy of even being a top 3 wide receiver this year. I guess he's going to get a whole bunch of targets, and that's probably going to put him right there. But, Jim, what's your thoughts on him in the Raiders offense?
Well, he's not going to be a top 3 in this offense. He's just not. Carr had a good season last year, considering what that offense was and what it was made of, and piecemeal here, piecemeal there. Jared Cook having a great season. Just really different pieces, but yet he still threw for 4,000 yards. But the fact of the matter is Ben Roethlisberger still threw 120 times more last year than Derek Carr did. So that's a big difference. 120 attempts is huge, especially when good percentage of that would go to Antonio Brown right off the top. He will still get a ton of targets this year. There's no doubt about it. And I don't know if it's going to be the 160, 169. Yeah, I think he had 169 last year. I think he had 162 in 2017. So he's been right around that range. I think I could see him getting close to that. I think he'll end up with close to the 100 receptions. I have him think somewhere in the mid-1,200 range for yardage, and I think I have him at 10 touchdowns. So not bad numbers, but definitely not top 3 numbers.
Mike, your thoughts on Antonio Brown now in the Raiders uniform?
I'll keep him out of the top 3, so I'll call that fiction. I think Jim's stated a lot of the things that I would agree with. I'm not a big enough believer in the QB in the way that this offense is going to run to declare him unaffected by the move from Pittsburgh to Oakland. It's
okay,
a far
but wait,
superior offense.
Let's take this a step further, though, because this is the other big question that comes for that. Do you think Juju is a better pick than Antonio Brown in fantasy drafts right now?
I think it's really close. It's really close. I wouldn't be mad at somebody that argued the other side of it. I think you could just make the argument that Antonio is going to be force-fed so much that we don't know if Josh Jacobs and Tyrell Williams are going to work out. You do know that Antonio Brown is the most reliable guy in that offense. The Steelers can pivot to somebody like James Conner running behind an excellent offensive line. The Raiders' offensive line hasn't proven to be that yet. I don't know if Josh Jacobs will be great as a rookie, right? Mm-hmm. So you could just make the argument that Antonio Brown is going to be force-fed, but Juju's in the better offense and might have more actually touchdown opportunities, even though Antonio was amazing with the red zone last year.
WTF Fantasy Football, last but not least, I think that every one of us, right? We sit on Sundays. We have multiple games on. We're watching our scores add up. We got the red zone on. And you got family around on the weekend. Everybody works hard. So I think we need to get our families involved in fantasy football. What I suggest is maybe put something in it for your family members here. Put something on the line so they root for your team and they back you. I think that we should put leagues together, Jim, and the last place team, their spouse or significant other, should have to clean up after the draft party every year.
Oh, my God.
Well, I'm all in for that. I honestly could say I can't remember the last time I came in last in a league. So I'll be all in on that. I'm pretty sure my wife has enough faith in me that she would be all in on that. But I could imagine that quite a few don't have the kind and wonderful wife that I do as I wave to her to do that. So I can imagine quite many others would have issues with that.
Mike, what do you think? I mean, your wife would be there rooting for you on Sunday afternoons, and your family would bond together. And if you happen to come in last, you get a couple injuries, so you got to clean up a little.
Well, first thing I would say about this question is that it's obviously concocted by a man who's divorced. So that's number one. Number two, I'll have to concur with Jim. I don't really have much fear of coming in last place in any leagues. If you put us in a super expert league, then, there's always some risk there. But I feel good about not coming in last place. And thirdly, if there was a league where that occurred and somebody actually convinced their wife that they have to clean up after the draft that they didn't participate in, I would not be in the room to watch it. I would put my phone somewhere to record it to see how mad she would get. And then probably post it on Facebook for everybody to watch.
There you have it. WTF Fantasy Football. Jim, got a lot of good stuff going on the network with thriving, new things happening every day. And some listener interaction could be coming up pretty soon.
Yeah, we got things coming on right now that could be very big for the network very soon. We're hoping to be able to announce something pretty quickly here that we're working on that could be pretty big for us, and we're looking forward to that. And like I said at the top, I mean, we got 16 different podcasts now. We got about 30 hours of programming a week, and the guys are really all starting to come together, and it really looks good what we're doing so far, and we expect bigger and better things going forward. We're still looking for any IDP or Dynasty podcasts out there that want to join this network. You know, we don't have really anything dedicated to that yet, but that's what we're trying to build here. We're trying to build something for everyone. Eventually, we'll break into the other sports. We'll get them involved. We'll bring on a DFS podcast here soon. So we got a lot of different things going on. And if you want to check out any of the podcasts, again, just go to fulltimefantasy.com. There's a drop-down link for podcasts. It'll take you to the page that lists all of the podcasts in the network. And each podcast has its own individual page. If you find one you really like, you can just go right there. So, yeah, we definitely have a lot of good things going. If you're on Twitter, you can follow the network using the hashtag FTF for Full-Time Fantasy, FTFPodNet, and you'll see everything we do.
There you have it, Mike Blewett. Of course, we can find you on Twitter. But I want to just touch on it. Jim's giving someone an opportunity. If you're in IDP league, you could be the next Gary Davenport. He wins like little awards each and every year, and he tells people all about these strange guys that nobody's ever heard of, and they all come out. And if you're one of those guys that are a little weird like that, and you do a little defensive side of football, Jim's going to make you a star, Mike Blewett. I think that Jim's offering the guy everything. They got to just come out there and take it, Jim.
Yeah, Gary has been a writer on fantasy football for a long time. IDP was his specialty, but for years now he's been writing for Bleacher Report, and now he's even writing for The Athletic on occasion. So that could be you. If you feel like you have some expertise, certainly do the podcast. Gary made 1 million appearances trying to get the information out there, and it worked for him.
There you go. You have it there. Mike, where can people find you?
Find me on Twitter at Mike Blewett, and obviously I do a show currently once a week on the Fantasy Sports Radio Network.
And Jim, where can they find you?
They can find me on Twitter at FantasyTaz, and of course at ffchamps.com. I'm running the day-to-day operation over there, and we got our draft kit coming out soon with a load of good information, so we're really looking forward to getting that going. And I will be starting up the Fantasy Football Frenzy on the FNTSY network pretty soon here.
You guys can find me right here. I think I'll be here next week. So far, I've outlived Elvis Presley by 8 years, and I'm still counting, and hope to add to that next week. So make sure you join us on WTF Fantasy Football. And I never thought I could outlive Elvis, but I have done it. I think I don't eat as much chicken as he used to eat, but I think I've ate other things, like I like meatballs. So meatballs over chicken wings is the success to outliving Elvis Presley. We're out of here.